Did I tell you about this slightly unquiet thing that happened to my friend? And how he still waits to see what payment might be due in the end. Now, my friend had a lovely son. No, as far as I still know, he has a son who is lovely, as all little boys must surely be. And it was near Christmas. He had taken the little chap to the West End to see a show, and they were beginning to come home when suddenly the boy turned to his father and said, "Father, surely this is the best place to buy me a toy. You promised me that this Christmas I could choose what I wanted, and I want to choose something from here." My son, we agreed we were going to choose from the toy shop at home." "Oh no, Father, you agreed it. I didn't. I would give anything to have a toy from this city of glitter and lights. I am sure the West End is the best place for delight." Just as the lad said it, the father caught out of the corner of his eye a street that he hadn't seen before, and at the bottom of that street, almost an alley, there was a shop of glam and glitter. And he turned his head and read, "Magic and toys, unforgettable treats for little girls and boys." And it seemed to him, as perhaps it would seem to you, if you had a child on the verge of tears, sad to leave the West End, that here was a heaven-sent opportunity. "Shall we try here?" said my friend. And he took the little chap by the hand, and the pair of them went up to the shop. Toys and magic. "Oh yes, Father, magic. I've always wanted to see some magic." "Magic doesn't exist, my fine fellow. You'll find out it's all trickery. No doubt they will show you in this shop." And he went in. And as the pair of them went in, there was a sound, not a bell, but more of a dry rattle, as if the bell was made of bone. And they went through a thick, dark curtain. And they waited. And the shop was musty, smelt almost of incense. They waited a long time. And the father turned, thinking, well, it must be closed. And he went to go. He pulled back the curtain. But there was no door there. Only a wall. And as he did so, suddenly, from the dark behind them, a man coughed. "You've come, I guess, to purchase my wares. Now, my fine little fellow, what are you after? Magic such as you could not believe?" And he took from the shadows a doll, and he held it out to the sun, and the doll looked absolutely lifelike. And as the father and the son watched, it raised its little eyes and moved its mouth and stared at them defiantly, as if it were a little girl caught as a doll. "Dolls are for girls, are they, my fine fellow? How about this sort?" said the shopkeeper, and putting that doll away, bought up from some other cupboard, I guess, in the shadows, a very lifelike figure with long red hair, a woman perhaps, dressed in the the guest as somebody from the Ancien Regime. And he pulled her head, and the head popped off. Guillotined, you know. And as it popped off, it was as if blood seemed to come out, and yet there was no blood. It must have been elastic, must have been, the father said to himself, for the head flew back to the body. And the old aristocratic woman looked at them, almost appealing. "No, dolls! Have you got soldiers? They're not dolls." Of course, my fine fellow. "Shall I bring you out knights in armour?" "Oh, yes, please." And the shopkeeper moved his arms, and suddenly a light appeared, and on that light there was a table. By that light they saw a table, green baize, and on it armies were moving. Medieval warfare, perfect. Not all of them knights, but men-at-arms, and then peasants pressed into the conflict, where you could almost smell the fact that they'd been living in their clothes for weeks. And as the father and son watched, snow seemed to be falling on this old battlefield as great armies clashed and soldiers fell down, and there was no sign of movement. "Yes, I love that." "Have you any other toys, perhaps more appropriate than just this?" "Well now, perhaps I could show you our other rooms." "Maybe." And the shopkeeper led them to the very back of the shop, and they seemed to step through a shadow. And suddenly they were in a great fairground, with the Wurlitz going again and again and again and again. And the shopkeeper turned to the son and said, "I remember you wished last night to go to the greatest fairground on earth." "But I meant Disney." "This is greater than Disney. Look, this toy could be yours." Just then, a mighty roller coaster cart drew up by them, and father and son, before they knew quite what had happened, were on the great ride. And up it went, and plunging down it went, and they screamed as if their souls would be rendered from their bodies. And up it went, and down it went, and round and round and round it went, and round and round and round it went. And the father looked, and he looked down at the person operating, thinking it must be the shopkeeper. But he saw only, at the end of the ride, a dark figure with a white face that for all he knew could have been a skull. And the lad screamed, "Stop! I can't bear!" And all of a sudden, the ride was gone. The boy was very shaken, and the shopkeeper said, "Have some tea." And he gave them a beautiful cup of the finest herb tea, cinnamon and sugar. "Let me take you to another room. I seem to remember that you love playing with your gun, that you dream of being a space trooper." "Oh, yes." "Well then." And they stepped through another black screen, and suddenly they were in a long, endless corridor, and lights, laser lights, were shining at them, and the boy was dodging backwards and forwards, and in his hand he held a gun, and again and again and again he fired at it, at distant soldiers ever retreating. But his father looked anxious and worried, for it seemed to him this was just too real. That laser was hitting real folk in some far-flung world, or so it seemed to him. But that must have been, he thought, just a dream. And he said at last, "Stop!" just as the lad was coming towards the end and starting to shoot at not just soldiers, but everyone. "Stop!" "Don't you like this?" said the shopkeeper. "I do," said the son. "I don't," said the father. "Well then, let us play make-believe and dress up." I seem to remember that you were just finishing The Three Musketeers. You've just finished it. Oh yes, it's my favourite book I've ever read. Well, you shall be them. And suddenly they were dressed in broad-brimmed hats with long feathers and had swords at their side and pistols. And they were standing by a running river. And as they watched, a woman, head was shrouded in a dark red bag, and she was being rowed out into the river. And behind her there stood a man in a black cowl, ready to perform his task. And the mist started to flow over the river, and both father and son said, "Stop! We know what happens now!" It seemed so funny in the book. And the shopkeeper was suddenly there again. And they were back in the original shop, and he said, "Well, which of our delights, my young chap, would you like?" And for a moment his father looked in fear at his son, fearing he would choose the laser gun again. But his son said, "No, I want the soldiers, the knights in armour." "Then I shall box them up." And they were all boxed up, more soldiers than his father had ever seen, although what they were made of, metal or plastic or bone, the father could not quite decide. "Well, you're all ready to go now, aren't you, my fine fella?" For the son now had the great box of soldiers. "Thank you, father." And my friend took the shopkeeper aside and said, "How do I pay you? I can write you a cheque. Do you take cards?" And the shopkeeper said, "Oh no, we don't take cards, and you can't write a cheque, and don't worry about cash." "But I must pay you." "Oh, don't you worry about that. Payment will be due when payment is ready and due." And then he took them to the other side of the shop and opened a shadow that could have been a curtain, but it was so dark. And there was a golden door, and they stepped through it, and they were in quite a different bit of the West End. It took the father a little moment to realise they were down near Covent Garden, when before they had been in Oxford Street. And they took the tram and the train home. And the father tried to smile at his son's endless happiness at all his new soldiers. Payment would be due when it was due. The words seemed to ring in his ears. What had it meant? But one thing gave him much peace of mind. His son, when he took out his soldiers, they seemed to be normal, made probably of plastic, but possibly of lead. He got his son to wash his hands after he touched them. And his son would play with them happily for hours and hours. "Isn't it good, my son, that these don't move by themselves, that they're just soldiers in the end?" "What do you mean, father? They're no different to how they were in the shop. They fight their great battle as the snow rages, again and again and again. Do you not see it?" No, I don't. Payment would be due when payment would be due, and there would be no escape in the end. The words seem to linger, in my friend's mind. Of course he's gone back to try and find the shop, but there isn't even the memory of the shop in Covent Garden or in Oxford Street. All he has as evidence is the soldiers and the memory of a payment to come.